Elevate TV, advancing kingdom lifestyle.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Gigi Report. Happy New Year for those of you that are just watching us. This is our first show this year, and we're glad you're tuned in. So join us and welcome to a wonderful new opportunity this year. We will make sure that Gigi Reports continue to produce amazing conversations. So we welcome you to join us today in a very wonderful conversation. And I have a special guest with me here on the set, Apostle Osborn, George Yogo. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Now, as always, I'm going to introduce the subject matter and then also introduce my guest. Then we get this conversation underway. If you're watching or following this conversation on our social media platform, because we are live on YouTube, Elevate TV Kenya YouTube page, and Facebook as well, Elevate TV, please make sure you share with your friends and also leave your footprints on those social media platforms. You can comment. You can tell us what you think about the conversation we are having. This is an amazing technology for all of us. All right, so welcome. Today, our subject matter is church and politics. And the question we are asking is, has the church gone to bed with the state? They just concluded elections, produced, of course, as you know, a very unprecedented relationship between church and the state. And this relationship has been characterized by a very warm embrace by the head of state, His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, and who actually went further to sponsor a Thanksgiving church service at State House, complete with a state luncheon for the church leaders, which I had the pleasure and the privilege of attending. So, question remains, has the church gone to bed with the state? That and among other things are going to be the subject of our discussion. And as always, the Gigi Report is a platform for big, bold, and honest conversation on a broad range of subject matters: social, cultural, political, economic, philosophical, theological. And today we're going to have a mix of theology and politics and anything in between. So stay tuned in. All right. So let me introduce our guest very briefly, and then I'll get the conversation underway. My guest today is Apostle Osborn George Yogo. He is an ordained minister, founder of Royal Kingdom Embassy Church here in Nairobi. Apostle Yogo is an author, leadership strategist, and political advisor. Mr. Yogo studied leadership at Word of Faith Bible Institute in Nigeria, and he holds various qualifications in business and communication and other things he will tell us. And so, welcome to the show, my brother and Apostle, man of God.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Very good.
Yes.
So let's start from where I always like to start with my guest. Tell us about your career and how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's a long history.
Briefly, make it brief.
It's a long history.
But tell us the sweet stuff.
Yogo was once a street boy in the streets of Nairobi.
Amazing.
I was born to a man I do not know until today. One thing I know is black, because I'm not point anything.
Yes.
So definitely he's black.
Yes.
I wish I had the privilege of meeting him for having given birth to this wonderful young man. Mm-hmm. So my foster father also did not like my presence. He considered me a liability that needed to be eliminated. So I ended up sleeping in a cold classroom when I was around 7 years old until I was taken over by my uncles. So I was raised by my maternal uncles in a place around Kisii.
Wonderful.
That is a place around Mosocho. I almost dropped out of school until I was introduced to a lady called Barbara Reinhardt, a representative of the German Volunteer Service.
Okay.
That is the lady who paid my high school fee. When I was going to Form 4, she was moved from Kenya to Zomba, Chelsea College in Zomba. So I didn't think I would make it to the university. So later on, my aunt appreciated my presence and asked me, why not join your cousin, and that is the son in Nairobi, who could take me to college. I came to Nairobi. Well, apparently, the worst happened. I ended up working as a house help for a period of time, and I never went to college. And one day, the woman of the house decided that our presence was also again a nuisance. Myself and the husband's sister, we ended up being thrown out.
Okay.
So I was here with no college education. The only certificate I had was my class 8, my Form 4, which I had not actually picked. So I ended up in the streets of Nairobi. So I began life from the streets of Nairobi. One day I stumbled into a message that was preached by Dr. Edepo, manhood, a product of challenge.
Okay.
And I told myself, let the challenge I go through produce my manhood.
All right.
I learned that success is not abroad, success is inboard. You don't have to travel far to become great. You only need to travel deep within. So I began the quest of finding myself from that day in the streets of Nairobi. To cut the long story short, I began life by acting at Kenya National Theatre. And later on to Kenya Broadcasting Corporation as an artist, earning 3,000 shillings a month. I was introduced to a gentleman called Kiproparap Kibos by a lady called Josephine Mohonja, who I think still works for KBC until today.
Wonderful.
Kibos left.
Yes.
And I was hired as an artist, earning 3,000 shillings a month.
Amazing.
I met a gentleman who died. He was the head of theatre arts at the University of Nairobi, called Dr. Pio Muma. Pio Muma the late, or Pio managed to get me enrolled into the University of Nairobi, but I did not finish a year.
Okay.
I got involved into student politics and I was expelled. So I lost the opportunity. But through church, I got my way up and I got sponsorship and I went to Nigeria, did my first course, came back into the country and I did my second course, and the rest is now history.
Okay.
Career-wise, I have had slow growth, sometimes spontaneous. It's a brew of activities.
Yes.
Sometimes very slow and sometimes very spontaneous, and you can't just place your hands on how did it happen. So I attribute it to God. I have worked as a clergy for the last 25 years with World Mission Agency or Living Faith International, where I worked both locally and abroad. And after that, I worked with the Breakthrough Chapel International under Pastor Wole Joseph, who is still my mentor until today. And then I founded the Royal Kingdom Embassy. But apart from my spiritual aspect, I have been a leadership consultant, a trainer. I am a published author. I have 6 books in the market. I am also a life coach. Right. I have worked within the political cycles for almost the last 18 years as a strategist and an advisor. So basically, my life revolves around helping to shape people's lives and putting things into perspective.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That last bit, shaping people's lives and putting things into perspective. So I think what I find that is interesting, and maybe it must have been life-shaping, is your experience at the university. And you kind of seem to have been beaten by some political bug, which troubled. How did that go about? What did you guys do to warrant being expelled by the great university? Did you burn a dormitory or something, or you stoned a politician or what?
I got into politics in a very queer way. After my 4th form,
yes,
you know, being raised in the village, I got an opportunity, an invite by a friend of mine. He was called George somebody. I only remember him as Bobby Black. Yes. We had 2 Bobbies in high school. I had Bobby Brown. George Ouma, who is still my friend. He was my desk mate for 4 years.
Yes.
Then we had the other one called Bobby Black. Both of us were in karate club.
Yes.
So Bobby invited me to Kisumu, and that was such a great opportunity for me to visit the town for the very first time.
Yes.
So when I got into town, there was trouble. That was mid-90s. Apparently, I got there and I found a group of young men. They're like, now we are complete, we need to move. So I was like, move to where? And I was told to follow. So I just followed. I got out, we were given some batons, wooden batons.
Yes.
And we did not even move far before stones started crossing my face. Then I realized we were actually in a battlefield.
Right.
I did not know what we were fighting for. So I was fighting and asking, why are we fighting? Then I'm told, well, Raila Odinga had come to Kisumu, but he was stopped by a gentleman who was the mayor then, called Oile.
Yes.
So Raila moved back to Nairobi.
Yes.
And he went to re-strategize. So Raila was coming back to Kisumu, and he must pass through Kisumu, through the State House Lodge, to their house, which is actually behind the State House Lodge.
Yes.
So apparently I was recruited as one of the foot soldiers unknowingly.
Yes.
So I ended up fighting this battle for almost the whole day.
Okay.
So after that, I asked myself, what did I actually do?
What did I get myself into?
Yes.
Yes.
But it became a little enticing and exciting. It was a mixed reaction, and I was like, I wanted to know more. So I took time to understand who is actually this Raila Odinga. So I really wanted to know who is Raila Odinga. What is politics all about? I was a student leader, yes, in secondary school, but I didn't know much because I was in a village school.
Yes.
So I get in. That is how I ended up into politics. So when I come to the university, I'm at the theater, I get introduced to a gentleman known as Moses Oburu.
Yes.
Moses Oburu was the chairman of SONU that time, and one of the powerful SONU leaders. Babu was not powerful.
Yes.
Oburu was very powerful because Oburu would fly with the president in the same jet.
Okay.
That was President Moi then.
Yes.
So I got so attracted to this man, and he was wearing these flowing West African gowns. So I got attracted to him, and I wanted to be his student. Mm-hmm. Little did I know, by being his student, I'd exposed myself to the wrath of the administration.
Right.
I never survived.
Off the set, you mentioned to me that you have actually worked for the state. You've been, worked for some of these politicians, both as a state officer, political advisor, and stuff like that. So tell us about that and what your experience has been. We are talking about some of the latest, work that you've been doing. You got into that space. What has been your experience?
Again, by coincidence, in 2002, I teamed up with a group in Mombasa called ORIC.
Okay.
That during the campaigns for the Kibaki and the Raila, when there was dire need for change in the country from the previous regime into a new dispensation. So I got involved with a team that was called ORIC in Mombasa that saw me climb up the ladder in politics and political strategy. Mm-hmm. But after that, I left the country. Mm-hmm. So when I got back, there was the clamor for the constitutional review, the yes and no campaigns in 2005.
Right.
And again, we came together and put up a team of young people that were running around across the country to try and see that we opposed the constitution that had been put in place because we felt that it was not people-driven.
All right.
So I worked at the secretariat around that period of time then.
Okay.
So that also projected me again further into the political maneuvers.
Yes.
Then we joined, that time we were together, myself, working together with Raila Odinga. There was William Samoei Ruto, the current president. Yes. The former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. All these guys were working together under one umbrella.
Under the no campaign.
Under the no campaigns.
Yes.
So then we moved together into 2007 elections.
Yes.
Where again we were together with Raila Odinga and the current president in an office that is known as the Pentagon, then that period of time. Mm-hmm. So after the botched elections in 2007 and the post-election violence, mm-hmm. I ended up getting invited to serve in the office of the Prime Minister as an advisor on youth affairs. Okay. And so I worked as an advisor on youth affairs, coming up together. You see, Kenya, as it stands today, we are looking at 72.8% of the Kenyan population falling below the age of 35. That's true. Which means we're basically having a youthful population in the country. So the greatest concern and the people that were greatly affected during the post-election violence were the young people. Mm. So we needed to come up with ideas that would make sure we cushion the country from the pangs of post-election violence, while at the same time realizing that our economy is growing. When the government picked over from Moi, we started from a dwindling economic growth of 2.5. And then now it again went down after rising to around 4 point something, and then it went down again after post-election violence. So the government had to pick from scratch once again, like it did in 2002.
Yes.
So my idea, together with a lady called Jane Wangoi Muringi, who was the advisor to the Prime Minister also on youth affairs, was to try and come up with ideas. What are these things that we need to put in place? So we did a couple of things. Actually, we started what we call the round tables with the Prime Minister that also engaged the President, because there was a cabinet subcommittee in the office of the Prime Minister.
Yes.
So most of these things would be channeled. We also had a pool of policy analysts with whom I worked in the office of the Prime Minister.
Right.
So we started with the youth round table with the Prime Minister to try and define the mainstreaming of youth agenda in the country, which means basically the larger population of the country.
Right.
And went on and on and on and further. One of the things I participated in putting together and coordinated till the end was the Kenya Youth Empowerment Program, which still runs until today.
Well, and was that also the genesis of the Kazi kwa Vijana or something?
Actually, the Kenya Youth Empowerment Program,
yes.
Kazi kwa Vijana was a component.
Okay.
When we took over, the first thing that Raila Odinga came up with was the Kazi kwa Vijana initiative. But people don't realize the Kazi kwa Vijana only lasted 1 year.
Right.
So after 1 year, we realized we needed to scale it up.
Okay.
Because Kazi kwa Vijana was purely labor intensive. Now, the introduction of Kenya Youth Empowerment Program meant that we now include other aspects of the young people.
And it was now more formalized, more structured.
So this had 3 components. We had the labor intensive as the first component. So we still had Kazi kwa Vijana, but it was now the other one was run by all the mainstream ministries, the government agencies, but now we did it to 7 ministries.
Okay.
So that you could manage it in a better way. And it was also, we rolled up a pilot program that was in 9 counties. So the first was labor intensive. The second was internship.
All right.
The government engaged Kenya Private Sector Alliance to run an internship program paid by the government. The internship program by Kenya Private Sector Alliance is still running until today. Then the third component was capacity building by Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. Now, this has now transitioned into what they call the opportunities, because they changed the program from KIEP to KIOP during the Uhuru's regime. So those are programs that are still running. Okay. So we set in place several programs that were running and managed for the government.
So maybe you can just mention a little bit about the transition into the Uhuru government, 2013, and presently the current transition. From your vantage point, what do you see happening? And then we're going to throw in the church into that conversation.
Well, I'm looking at 3 transitions that I observed as a mature person. I observed the 2002 transition. I observed the 2013 transition. I observed the 2007 transition and also the 2017 transition.
Yes.
Looking at all these transitions, I think where we stand as at now is the worst ever that we've ever experienced. If you go back to the hundreds of billions economy that Moi was running, to the trillion economy that Uhuru introduced, and you realize that Kibaki picked over from a country that had an economic growth of around 2.5%. So which means basically what we are talking about now is a country far much better than what Kibaki picked from Moi. And Kibaki capitalized on programs that would have an immediate trickle-down effect. I tell people that Kibaki had no excuse for not honoring his campaign pledge of introducing free primary education. And he declared free primary education without a budgetary allocation for it. But the government was committed to making sure that what they told the people would be delivered. Because that has to be delivered. And therefore, Kibaki picked from nothing but delivered on the promise and helped to build the economy. Within 2 years, the economy had grown to around 5%. By the time he was running for his second term. And we had a little of destabilization in 2007, 2008 during the post-election violence that saw the economy again drift backwards.
Yes, the numbers, the GDP numbers.
Yes.
2007, by the end of 2007 financial year,
yes,
the GDP was 7. It was actually hitting 7.
Yes, it was actually hitting 7. It almost went to around 7.5.
Yes.
Yes.
It was actually 7.1. 2008, it went down to 1.7.
Yes.
So it's like the numbers flipped, and then it started growing.
It went back to where Kibaki had picked the government from Moi.
Yes.
But now you realize that within a short period of time again, the economy picked up. You can confirm, by the time the coalition government was getting out of the office, Kenya was financing almost 70% of its budget.
All these transitions have taken place. Government, of course, is a going concern. You know, government has to exist anyway. And there are transitions, and we've seen how they have shaped. How did the church influence that change, that transition? The church was on the No campaign in 2005,
yes,
which it won. I don't know whether it built confidence in the church and its ability to influence government. And then now you've watched the church right now transform itself. Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, right now, the church has so progressed in its engagement with the state that the just elected president called a Thanksgiving service at State House, which he paid for, and threw a big luncheon. And everybody was very happy. And he told them, by the way, once you do your lunch, don't even leave in a hurry. Go around State House and pray and speak in new tongues and just kick out all the demons that you might find hanging around here. You know, you're welcome to do that for us so that you let us run a government without all these, activities. Speak to that.
The church has always been together with the government, and the church must be and should be together with the government. I explain this in this way. If you look at the Bible history, the world is controlled through two authorities. We have the civic authorities and we have the spiritual authorities.
Yes.
The civic authority is the structure that governs the world.
Nations, the
nations.
States.
And then we have the spiritual authority. We still have two spiritual authorities. We have the spiritual authority that is the evil spiritual authority, and we have the divine spiritual power. So you are either in the civic governance or you are in spiritual leadership. Now, if you look through the Bible history, that the civic authority was always at the command of spiritual authority. Governance was instituted through the pulpit, through the anointing, through the hand of God. There is no king that you can check in the history that took over without the handwork of God getting involved in it. So there is no separating leadership, the civic leadership from spiritual leadership. So the ideal situation is that the church and the state must work together. Okay. The only thing is that the roles have to be clearly defined. Where the church plays its oversight role. When Samuel meets Saul, he tells Saul, why have you done this dishonor to God? Because you've not done exactly what God had asked you to do. Because Saul was able to point out to the king his errors. Now, the church must continue with the oversight responsibility of the state and the governance, the civic duty, the civic responsibility of our leaders. That is the role of the church, not the opposition. It should be the role of the church.
And Apostle, man of God,
yes,
that conversation is still so contested because what you're describing, oversight authority, and maybe you can go into the details of what that oversight involves, and what have you oversighting over? Are you oversighting over justice? Are you oversighting over corruption? What are you oversighting around? And of course, remember, there's also another third party, the media, which is also claims to be an oversight over the state. We've got to call off the state if it goes off the rails.
To understand how powerful the church is, and more so in this country, we are calling ourselves a Christian nation. Almost 80% of our population, we call ourselves as Christians. Whether we profess or we are dormant, but we are all Christians. Whether we are saved or not, we are still Christians. And if you look at the history of Kenya, we are saying we have over 4,000 registered churches. So this entire population falls approximately around 4,000 registered churches. In other words, you only need 4,000 leaders to have control of approximately 80% of Kenya's population. Now, but we have not taken that responsibility as spiritual leaders to have control and charge of the population that falls to us. And therefore, we have let the politicians run amok.
Okay.
And even interfere with our own spiritual arrangements within the church setup. Because the politicians have become more powerful than the clergy, which ought to be the reverse. And it is because as clergy, we have also delegated our authority and responsibility to the politicians.
Or you can say that again. So you really can say that again. All right.
So today, a pastor can stop his service to go honor an invitation by a leader. Because apparently to them, the elected leadership position is highly exalted more than the apostolic position that the man of God is having in this place as it stands. So we have flipped the coin and changed the things, forgot about our own roles and position, being the representative of the Most High God, the earth, the world, and the fullness thereof. The supreme authority to which we all answer is God. The representation of that supreme authority is the man of God.
Absolutely. Now we're going to come back to that conversation. We are, ladies and gentlemen, I believe you're following this conversation. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'm going to ask the man of God to explain, how we can, reshape this relationship to ensure that the church is actually not being summoned to the king. The church itself has capacity to summon the king to itself. I guess that's where you're leading to. So take a short break. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea, and let's come back to this conversation. So don't go away. Keep it Elevate TV.
Lozi Christian School, Kasarani, provides the very best in educational child care. We offer pre-primary education, that is baby class, PP1 and PP2 from ages 3 to 6 years old in safe and cognitive stimulating environment to provoke the creativity in your child. All these founded on a strong Christian setup. We are located at Life Church International Kasarani, situated between Kenya Tents and Farmers Choice Kasarani, off Kasarani Mwiki Road, along the street between Power State Supermarket and Total Petrol Station. For more information, contact Gladys on 0758 396 110 or 0734 628 808. Lozi Christian School, a foundation for the future.
Welcome back. This is the Gigi Report. We are having an interesting conversation here. We are talking about church and politics. Has the church gone to bed with the state? And before we went to the break, we were talking about, the fact that I think the state and the politicians have more power than the church leaders. So, and the state officers can afford to summon the church leaders, and they have to respond. So, Apostle Yogo, please speak to that. I mean, that the state has become so powerful, and politicians, obviously, that are the ones charged with running state affairs in their various formation, the executive, parliament, judicial services. Obviously, it's not political, but obviously, it serves at the behest of the two other arms of government, obviously, and that the Constitution, which the president is the custodian of making sure it's being obeyed. So, politicians and politics and state power has become so powerful that the church can be summoned. So, speaking to that, and then also speak to the history of that. How did you get to where we are? And is there a chance that one day the church will tell the president and his guys, please come here, kneel down here. We're going to pray for you, and you're going to come to our venue, not your venue?
Now, allow me to explain it this way. Civic leadership is an earthly leadership.
Okay.
It's purely earthly leadership, sensual, mental. It's earthly leadership. Spiritual leadership is not earthly. Everything is controlled and run from the spirit realm. Now, the person who has the spiritual power and authority is the spiritual leader, not the civic leader. So, the passing on of God's agenda, the relaying of God's agenda, the communication of God's agenda, the execution of God's agenda is through spiritual leadership. So if everything is controlled spiritually, it means therefore whatever is earthly is subject to the spiritual leadership. And so you realize that Saul is looking for something, but then he says, let's consult with the spiritual leader. And you check it out through the Bible. You say, bring me the thummim, bring me the instruments of spiritual authority so that we may consult with the Father. Leadership consulted with the spiritual authority throughout history of creation. Why? Because spiritual authority is the superpower to which the civic authority should be answerable. And at a period of time...
Let me interrupt you. Would you say that that's what a theocracy is about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But number one's theocracy right now in our system.
Let's be very honest. I have always told people there is nothing called democracy in life. Because if we say democracy, I will bet with my life, and the President of the Republic of Kenya can still confirm that there is no independent government in the world, not even the independent of the United States of America. There is always an underhand power that controls every government.
Okay. Matters well stated that spiritual authority has power over earthly civic.
Yes, but
authorities.
now where we find ourselves is that the church lost its voice.
Okay.
Completely lost its voice. What we are trying to do right now, and we call ourselves as getting to bed with the garment, is basically a fallacy. It doesn't exist. Because as it is today, there is, I stand to be corrected, but there is no single Kenyan clergy who can stand and tell the President of the Republic of Kenya, Ruto, you are wrong.
Okay.
Because they don't even have the gist to do it. You understand me? But that is the position we need to find ourselves. But how then did we lose our voice? Off the set, we had a discussion, and I was telling you that throughout history, revolutions have always come through different systems. One is student leadership, and this is across the globe. And to the civic society across the globe. And three, through the church.
Okay.
One of the greatest revolutionists that ever existed is Martin Luther King and Martin Luther King Jr. You go down to South Africa, you still find the clergy that were very strong in agitating for revolutions. Come into Kenya during the second liberation that we always talked and fought for. You talk about people like John Alexander Muge. You talk about Okulu. You talk about Reverend Timothy Njoya and several other.
Bishop David Gitari.
Bishop David Gitari.
One time, let me throw in something there. He preached a sermon at Osage Cathedral. Mene Tekel.
Yes.
Parasin, and he was telling of the president, absolutely saying your kingdom is measured, it doesn't measure up. And he got in trouble for it.
Yes. Now you see, this has been the revolution basis across the country, across the globe.
Yes.
What was happening to these men of God? They understood their role and their position, and therefore they were willing to sacrifice their lives to make sure that what is expected of them is done. But coming down a post-Moi era, the church started going to bed with the president. We started by, when we appreciated His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, the first we consider Moi was still a Christian and a professing Christian, but we never appreciated him as a professing Christian. Kibaki came in and church was more welcome again around him. I think most probably because we considered Moi as having persecuted those clergy who stood to oppose him, now we embraced and appreciated Kibaki more.
And we thought Kibaki is more approachable. He's an amicable guy.
Yes. Oh, yes.
He's a career civil servant.
Yes.
He doesn't want fights. So, yes, he
so
went back to the church.
We went to deteriorate. We actually deteriorated with every regime. As
describe the Uhuru Kenyatta regime.
Let me start by Kibaki. I would give an example, and I believe some of those bishops would most probably be watching. They don't know this is out then. We laughed over it with a bishop friend of mine who was part of them after the meeting.
Yes.
One day, bishops are called together and they ran to Valley Road, Sitam, and they moved to State House. So Kibaki walks into the building and he says, Kabla muombe. He looked around and he said, nimewangalia nyote.
Ngoja kidogo. Those of you that are watching, I want you to listen to this story because I think the puzzle, and I really want us to, the puzzle has always been, how do you behave before president?
Yes.
So continue with the story. So
he walked
Council
in.
of Bishops.
Yes. So the president walks in and takes a look around the room, and then he says, I'll say it in English because maybe some people are not understanding Swahili. So what he said in Swahili was that I have looked at all of you and I know all of you, and you have all lied to me. That is the who is who in spiritual leadership.
Okay.
You have all lied to me. And now you're back here. I don't know what you want to say, but I will listen.
And that is Kabla Muombe.
Yes.
Before you pray.
Yes. Then
he did the first shot.
Yes. Then he said, Sasa ombeni. So my friend was actually asked to pray. Now when we were talking, I asked him, how did you feel? He said he lost all the scriptures he has known since he was born. Apparently, he thought that it is the president that had called for the meeting. So he joined the team thinking president has called us, only to realize it's the church that had summoned the president. But now president points out errors among the clergy.
Yes.
I have said this over time, and the politicians would lie to you, but if there is a man that most of these politicians dishonor, is a man with a spiritual title. One called a bishop, apostle. What they see all of them as: one, liars; as two, conmen; as three, beggars.
Indictment. That's a serious indictment.
I'm telling you because I have been there. I sat one day with a leader, I do not want to mention the names for his integrity's sake, and then a non-bishop walked into the room, talked to him and finalized. Then he came aside and he said, do you know this man has lied? I said, yes sir, he has lied. He said, but now he's a man of God. We have to help him. So how much do we give him? Throughout the period of time of serving in this country, I have noticed the extent to which men of God throw honor out of the window when they see political leaders. We go to the political leaders not with solutions. We go to political leaders with problems. So each time a man of God appears, you know definitely the next thing is, we have this project, we need this money. We have this problem, we need this solution. The clergy do not take solutions to leadership, they take problems to leadership. Unlike in the Bible history.
You can say that again because that's really the gist of the matter. And that's why we are asking this question. So has the church gone to bed with the state? So, in other words, if the church has to be, if the state has to take church leaders seriously, that has to change.
That has to change. You know why we consider it an honor to be invited to State House?
It is a big honor.
Because we value it. At the expense of you summoning, I am very aware of clergy in Africa who summoned the president. When Obasanjo wanted to change the constitution to run another time, he was told by a bishop, stop it. If you dare it, you die on that seat. He couldn't do it. I happen to have been close to a president in this country, and I spoke to him as a man who apparently he gave ear to speak to, and I told him, don't change the constitution. I will tell you what my bishop told another president: if you change the constitution, you will die on that seat. Pierre died on the seat. Now, we need to have men who can stand and point out errors and speak and tell the president, we need to see you as the president. 1, 2, 3 things that you're doing are wrong. They must stop. But we can't do that because each time we see the president, we expect to also live with a brown envelope.
Okay. But that is one side of the story. So recently, and I'm sure it's in the public domain, so it's not hearsay, when the president called for this Thanksgiving service, you know that actually the church leaders put together, something and establish an altar. So, and actually, they left.
No, that's what we need to have. We need to have conversations around how do we change the narrative.
Exactly.
Because I am telling you what I have seen with Kibaki. I worked with him. What I've seen with Ruto. What I've seen with the Uhuru Kenyatta. All these are things that any serious man of God should be able to point out and tell people we must depart from this tradition of being seen as beggars.
Okay.
This tradition of being seen that each time we go, we are going to present a need, not to offer a solution.
Okay.
The second thing that has happened to the church is that we, instead of acting as a voice, we became political partisans.
Speaking to that, I think before off the set we spoke at length about that, and you told me about like the genesis of the split within the church. So give us that a little background.
I was a member of Kenya Church, and
you need to describe what Kenya Church is.
Kenya Church was an amalgamation of all churches and parachurch organizations. So it brought together several spiritual leaders and figureheads across the country. We had several formations. We have Kenya Televangelists and the rest of the people, and several other groups joined together. Now, Kenya Church ended up breaking into 3 factions.
But before the break, Kenya Church was, when did the Kenya Church form, and what led to the formation of the Kenya Church?
I've not studied the history especially about the formations, but I remember I was party to it. I remember I followed Bishop Mark Kegohi in joining the Kenya Church and walked around with him. I remember one of the last events that we had with Kenya Church and Bishop Mark Kegohi was at KICC. What was it? In Kasarani.
Oh, which year is this?
In Kasarani, that should have been around 2005.
Okay.
2006. Okay. 2006, just before the elections. 2006. And we're driving back, and with Bishop Mark Kegohi was in his car and pointing out a few things that we needed to have done with Kenya Church. But shortly after that, before all this happened, then we were met with the elections. You remember 2005, the church came out so strongly for the constitution. And so I expected to see a continuity of the same, because we already put ourselves as a formidable force in this country in matters governance. But when we got to the elections, we had the bishops, basically the main bishops of the Kamba origin, without mentioning names. They all said God had spoken to them, and the president was His Excellency Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka.
Okay.
The others were not qualified to lead the country. Then we had our bishops from Mount Kenya region, who had also said, and they know what I'm saying, and every Kenyan know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the matter is in public.
Yeah, so they also said God had spoken to them, and they also anointed Kibaki as the president. Then we had the people from the Western Kenya region that also God spoke to and anointed His Excellency Raila Odinga as the president. So apparently one God spoke 3 different languages to the men of God. Right. And so we had 3 different candidates, all anointed by men of God, to be the president of the Republic of Kenya. Well, one became the president of the Republic of Kenya. So I don't know which group God spoke to particularly.
At the chagrin and discomfort of the other 2 formations.
So when we went into post-election violence and there was murder and killing all over, I strongly blamed the church for causing this kind of divisions. If the church had stood as an outfit, there are a lot of errors that would have not taken place.
Actually, you're right, and I know we don't want to revisit.
But I know church took ownership of the same.
Actually, the church took ownership of its missteps and the errors that were committed, and I think we learned from there. So the question right now is, where are these various formations right now? Is the church still speaking as one? From where you come from where you stand? So what has become of these various formations, and is the church united? That's the big question.
I would tell you from the depth of my heart, no.
Okay, so maybe give us a little bit of history. So after the soul searching, after the 2007, missteps, and obviously nobody liked the whole fallout. Even the president himself was very keen on maybe inviting the church again to kind of reconcile and let's rebuild afresh. And then the Hague scenario and all that. But then we come to 2013 and all sins are forgiven. Everybody is happy. Now we can do another election. Your observation from where you come from. What did you see happening, especially from the church space point of view?
Well, one thing I would say is, one, our leaders tried to buy their way again into the church. Mm-hmm. It was not the church dictating and determining what ought to have taken place. Mm-hmm. But our leaders, again, decided to buy their way into church. And we know what happened. The envelopes that went around in churches, to an extent that some churches now had to make declarations and say no more fundraisings, no accepting offerings from the politicians and the rest of the things. But now you see the gift silences the mouth. And so that is scriptural. Mm-hmm. So, well, the church still went in two opposing camps, because we still had part of the church that stood with and supported His Excellency Raila Odinga. Just before the elections, there was a prayer session held at KICC. Mm-hmm. It was on a Sunday service that brought together several clergy for Raila Odinga. We also had similar one held for His Excellency William Samoei Ruto. So the church still was not speaking as one voice when we went to the elections. But that notwithstanding, we have the opportunity to revolutionize movement and transform the operations and ensure that the church comes to what it ought to be. And that means we have to change the manner and the way that we relate with and interact with the state. I would give you an example, then I tell you what I'm saying. When I put together an outfit, because I worked for an outfit, a particular political formation, and so when I spoke to the political leader then, and I remember one thing he told me: if I must pay attention to the church, then bring me those clergy who have not defiled themselves. Wow. That was his word. He said, bring me those clergy who have not defiled themselves. Because a majority that are found in the political caucuses and setups are people who have defiled themselves. They are money preachers. They go to where there is something that is coming towards them. I am not saying it is wrong for the leaders to give church money. Paul says, if you partake of our spiritual things, it's not a sin if you partake of your carnal things. Right. Because a laborer that labors is worthy of his wages. So yes. Yeah, so we can't do a wholesale accusation if a politician is generous to a church. No. I think that should not be construed as manipulation. In fact, if a leader also refuses to make offerings to the church, then he's also not walking biblically. Yes. The only thing is that the begging tendency. Example is, when we were forming this, I remember one lady, a bishop, I would not mention name, and we had a crisis when she sat and talked in the midst of the people, and she said, I want to serve this man because I want him to become the president and help me build that prayer center. Okay. So she came with a need. All right. Not a solution. She already brought a need. So from the onset, you were not elected, but you are to be elected because this has to be done. Okay. Well, we have to have vision. That's true. But that is what is taking us? I asked a question when we sat together with the clergy, and I asked them, well, we are all clergy here. And the complaint is that the leaders do not engage us from the onset. They only invite us for 5 minutes prayer and give you a token and you leave. Mm-hmm. So they don't invite us. So I asked them, if you are to be invited to the table, there is something you must be offering. Actually, and I really want you to speak into that as we wrap up. We just have a few minutes as we wrap up, because there has to be an end in this conversation. In other words,
what is the vision? What exactly are we recommending in terms of how church leaders can engage with government? So you're speaking to that. And I think what I hear from you is you're saying whenever church leaders come face to face with the government and the state, and politicians for that matter, they must come with an agenda.
Yes.
It must not be a relationship of you politician help us do this and the other, and we're going to give you our vote. Because that is exactly what every other ordinary
It's
person
not a barter trade prayer system. We give you our prayers, you give us what we need. No, that should not be the case.
All right.
If you look at the history, because that is the question I ask the guys, what do you put on the table? I say, apart from the Bibles, you carry a little charge and a prayer. What else do you offer on the table?
That's a big
We
question.
need to understand that people like Blaise Pascal, great scientists that ever existed, the brain behind the calculators, was a believer. We need to understand that Colgate was a believer, a Sunday school teacher. We need to understand that Michael Faraday, the brain behind electricity, electromagnetism that gave us electricity, was a believer. If you look through the Bible, then you realize that believers had a role to play in revolutions and transformations. Church does not dull heads. The moment you are ordained as a clergy, it does not mean that your mental ability is eroded. The Bible says in the book of Isaiah chapter 11 verse 3 that when he, the Spirit, is come, he shall make him of quick understanding.
Yes.
He said, who knows the mind of Christ that he may advise him? He said, but we have the mind of God. Now, if you read Romans chapter 1, it talks about a reprobate mind, the mind of those who are not born again. Now, you cannot equate a reprobate mind, a zero brain, with a quickened mind of the Holy Ghost or the mind of Christ. It means, as the church, we actually ought to be the solution providers. Our professionalism, apart from being the clergy, when we meet with the state, we need to come with solutions at hand. We need to be called and we sit down and tell the church, or we call the state and tell the state, this is what you're doing, but this is wrong. This is how we feel it ought to be done, with the evidences of where it has been done and proven before, because we have the ability to do that. So the state stops seeing. Today, when we talk about appointment of pastors into positions, if today they want to appoint Gigi, and there is Owalo by the side,
what happens?
you see, now you put Owalo by the side and you put Gigi by the side.
Right.
What will they attribute to Gigi? Elevate TV and the church. Owalo is a known leadership strategist. I mean, you look at the different things. But Gigi is a technical person who went to school and qualified. What happened to what you learned in school when you became a clergy? Where did it go?
Okay.
Most of these pastors and preachers are professionals. I have my own qualifications. I stand there not because I am a clergy. I stand there as a son of Zion, that God has given wisdom and can advise on particular ways that the country can be governed.
Okay.
So as a church, we need to come to a point of dealing with leadership, knowing that church is not only spiritual, but church is also smart and wise.
Absolutely. Maybe you could speak into some of the more specific, maybe give an example, for example, in the education sector or in any other agri sector, small business, affordable housing. What are some of the options that perhaps church could actually begin to engage and provide solutions, to the development of our nation? And maybe whenever they have a chance with the head of state, they can say, by the way, we have this solution, we can do this. Are there some practical things that you think?
If there is a place that the church has always been in the forefront, is in education.
Right.
We have so many church-led schools, institutions. Can the church set a standard and craft a model that can be presented to the government, that this is what we have crafted as church? This is what is working for us, because we manage these schools, we run these organizations. These are the system. When we were revising the curriculum for the country, church, what role did it play? let's look at this. There's still conversations around the academic system. Church has been running schools. What models do we set, for example?
Okay.
When we are talking about several projects, climate change, and several other areas where, for example, social governance, let's look at, we are the people who control the masses. How do we lead? What examples do we set for the government?
Yeah, so I think as we come to the end, we've run out of time, and I want you to look at that camera, and I want you to speak to clergy who, see the government as this body out there that perhaps the best you can do is go, if you get invited to the big house, enjoy your cup of coffee, perhaps, and say, and by the way, we have some problems down there, would you step in and help? Speak to those members of the church leadership, and what you think that the way they need to engage the state in just as we wrap up.
Well, this is what I would say, that the clergy and the church does not live in a vacuum. We live in a country, and that country has leaders, of which we are part of that leadership. We must be absolutely involved. One thing I want us to realize is that places do not make people. It is people that make places. America did not make Americans. It is Americans that made America, that everybody envies. Japan did not make Japanese. They were once slaves, but Japanese made Japan that has become economic world power. Kenya will not make Kenyans. It is us Kenyans to make the Kenya that we so want. That responsibility rests on our shoulders. So as the clergy, we must take responsibility of playing in the forefront and providing solutions and guidance to leadership, creating benchmarks that people can refer to, and making sure we get what we need from our country.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to an end of tonight's conversation. And I believe that you've learned a lot, and hopefully we have addressed some of the issues that we set out to address. And thank you very much for staying tuned in. I promise you more of this same conversation, this in-depth conversation. So keep it Elevate TV. This is a Gigi Report. I've been your host, Godfrey Gichuki, and we'll see you another day, same time, same channel. Keep it Elevate. God bless you. Have a great evening. Bye for now.